So, dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. Thank you for coming to this event as we begin a new session here in the European Parliament. I'm pleased that we were able to organize this important event on debanking. Perhaps it's not a term that is commonly used yet in the public sphere in Europe, but I think it deserves much more attention than it's been getting. And I want to first thank my colleague Jorge Geresetti from the Economic Inclusion Group, who sparked this initiative. He's been doing a lot of work on this issue, and I'm pleased to say that we were able to publish this report on debanking that Jorge worked many months on. I would also like to welcome my colleague Elizabeth Dieringer from the Patriots Group, who will also be making remarks later. And thank you for coming, colleagues Branko Grims and Fernand Kartheiser. We have experts, but also individuals who have been affected by debanking. They've been targeted, and they have had their bank accounts closed without any explanation. I think it should not be controversial that every individual who has not broken the law, who has not committed any crimes, should be able to have a bank account. In today's world, it's a necessity. But on debanking, I would just like to read the initial paragraph from this report, which describes what we will be discussing today. So debanking refers to the abrupt termination or denial of essential banking services, especially basic payment accounts, to individuals, businesses, or nonprofits without explanation or recourse. Now, in today's world, I think we can agree that everything has become or is becoming politicized, weaponized. We see this in the judiciary, for example, the term lawfare, courts being weaponized for political purposes. But also in the business world, we have marketing campaigns, so-called woke marketing campaigns, which can sometimes also backfire against companies and cause a tremendous loss of value for these companies. And so this is happening more and more in today's world, and the banking sector is not immune to this. The banking sector is also a place where political activists can seize, for example, compliance departments and begin promoting rules that are not fair, frankly. And I think this has happened throughout the West. The most known cases, of course, are with the American President Donald Trump. His family was debanked during the Biden administration. This was a shock to many people, and I think because his own family was so affected by this, the current administration is moving in a very good direction to address this issue and make it really impossible for banks to continue doing this. In Europe, the best known case is, of course, Nigel Farage in Great Britain. It became so public that in the end he was able to open a bank account. But it is a sensitive issue, and in organizing this event, it was very difficult to find people willing to speak from the business community, especially our targeted defense companies. Now we have in Europe increased defense spending, but many of these companies who are producing the weapons that are needed are facing trouble with basic procedures in their banks. Also, the crypto world. I, as a member of the Econ Committee, I've been cultivating relationships with members of this community. They're innovators. They see Europe as a place with great potential, but they've also been facing discrimination, the majority of them actually. But they have been advised not to speak on this because of the sensitivity. So I want to thank again our guest speakers who are here and will be sharing their stories on how this happened to them. So without further ado, I want to thank again all our partners, the speakers. Nick, Anthony made the trip from Washington, D.C. He's an expert at the Cato Institute. He'll be making remarks later. So I hope we'll have a fruitful dialogue. I think it's essential to open this topic here in the European Parliament. Thanks again, all of you, for coming. And Jorge, I'll hand the floor over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Elizabeth, for welcoming the doors of the Parliament to us and to be the first ones pushing this issue, which, as you mentioned, is really important, is really unexplored, it is cutting edge, and it has ramifications on the rule of law, economic competitiveness, democracy, and even security, as you mentioned, with this aspect of defense companies. What I will do in my remarks today is to explain an overview of this problem of debanking, of financial exclusion. What is debanking? Debanking is a situation in which you, your company, your organization loses your access to financial services abruptly, without explanation, and without the possibility of any solution. These are three key characteristics because they offer no solution at you or no explanation or why you lose your bank account. This is happening to many communities. This is happening to non-profits, political people. This is happening with former members of parliament, former diplomats. This is happening also to companies, especially in energy, in defense, in cryptocurrency. 86%, in a recent survey, 86% of cryptocurrency companies in Europe, they declare that they have severe banking problems. And a similar situation in less extent is with energy and with defense companies. So this is happening with many kind of communities in the political and in the commercial space. Why we don't hear about it? Because when you are victim of debanking, lawyers tell you to not speak about the situation. So many business people do not speak about this issue because their lawyers tell them to not do so. And the same is with people that are in politics, the same with organizations, etc. But it's a growing problem in the US, in Europe, globally. And why this is a problem? There is two forms of debanking. The first form of debanking is the one that has brought more of the spotlight, especially in the US, which is a direct politicization of compliance departments, of compliance system for political reasons. It's a direct financial exclusion of people just for the way they see the world, just for their belief, or just for representing industries that current governments dislike, such as the Bitcoin sector, crypto assets in general in the US under the previous administration. The second form of debanking is a bit more nuanced, is a bit more complex. It's the form of debanking that is affecting, for example, former diplomats, people that are labeled politically exposed people by financial institutions. This form of debanking is an indirect way. The way anti-money laundering regulations have been growing in Europe, in the US, globally, is making extremely complex financial compliance. In Europe, annually, we spend $100 billion on financial compliance. This is 3 times, or at least 2.5 times more than the US. So because of this situation, there is extensive compliance on different groups that are classified as high risk. People who are involved in politics, people doing trade with, let's say, regions like Latin America or the Middle East or Africa, or people working on new technologies. They are classified as high risk by anti-money laundering regulations, and that pushes banks to not work with them because they become too risky and too expensive from a compliance perspective. Beyond the two debanking problems, there is also severe banking problems in general. We have many people, organizations, companies that even if they don't lose their bank account, they need to constantly even switch bank accounts, or they need to constantly provide documentation. Every couple of weeks provide new documentation, new statements. A lot of transactions are being frozen, which results in supply chain disruptions. A lot of money is being frozen, and in general, it's making very difficult life for many companies and many organizations. Because as you know, if you start facing banking problems, your suppliers, your partners, everybody loses trust on you. And especially these days, where this debanking problem is still very niche, most people do not understand that if a company is having banking problems, they do not understand why. They think that they're doing something wrong, perhaps. So there is a huge stigma. Why it is so difficult to find victims of financial exclusion to speak out in events like this one is because there is a huge stigma about the situation. Something very important that I want to express is why, for example, the European Union right to payment accounts directive don't work. In Europe, we have directives saying that everybody should have access to payments account, meaning that every citizen should have a bank account. But they don't work because they always have provisions in which they say that if a company or if a person do not meet anti-money laundering criteria, then the bank has a right to deny a person of a bank account. This is something that we have to reform, because what I believe is that if somebody has not committed a crime, everybody deserves the right to a bank account. In today's world, you cannot function without a bank account. You are not part of society. You cannot do everyday life. Your business will be bankrupt in a matter of days. And if you have a non-profit, nobody will want to donate you if they know you have banking problems. So it's a very efficient way of cutting somebody from society. As I mentioned, there is different implications from this debanking problem. We mentioned the rule of law, democratic perspective, but I believe it is also really important to emphasize that it is also a national security issue, and it is also a financial integrity issue. When it comes to financial integrity, first, if you push people outside the regulated financial system, if you put regular people to transact on black markets, it actually brings more criminality. It actually brings more illicit finance, which is what this anti-money laundering framework is trying actually to prevent. And the second issue is that if anti-money laundering laws continues to be so ambiguous, so complex, so obscure, untransparent, what happens is that you have all these people, all the authorities, all the investigators, all the law enforcement agents not being able to properly assess who is doing money laundering or not, but just trying to check everybody in a big surveillance apparatus. So, just to finish, I want to briefly mention that in response to this, what we have seen is that many people are relying on new alternative ways of finance, particularly Bitcoin and stable coins. There has been an increase in the amount of organizations and companies that rely on Bitcoin and stable coins to perform their daily operations. Organizations that send humanitarian aid to Latin America, to countries like mine, Venezuela, to Africa, even to Ukraine. They are using stable coins and Bitcoin. This is a development that we also need to watch, because if upcoming regulations in Europe are continuing to be excessively strict to Bitcoin, new forms of payment, new technologies, then we will also kill these new forms of financial inclusion that is helping millions of people not only in Europe, but around the world. I will finish by saying the 3 things that I believe we need to reform in Europe to ensure that nobody is debanked. The first one is that all Europe anti-money laundering framework has to really go in the direction of more competitiveness, more simplicity, and more financial inclusion. The way right now these regulations are done is that they are extremely manipulable, politicized, can be weaponized, and are so difficult to implement that if the current trend continues, there will be a point in which having access to financial services will be a privilege. It will be something that only a minority of people, organizations, and companies will be able to have. This is bad for competitiveness, it is anti-European, it goes against everything that we believe. The second one is that there has to be transparency. There has to be real transparency. We don't know how many people have been denied bank accounts. We don't know how many people have been debanked. We don't know in Europe the reasons of why people have been debanked. So the first step that we have to do to solve this issue is that we need to know all this data. We need to have information. We need to have transparent information. Because even though that we are putting this effort to put reports, to put solutions in place, we don't have data. So banks, they need to provide this data. So if somebody loses their bank account, banks must be asked to provide why, and they need to provide also the quantities of how much this is happening. Again, this is key to maintain trust with the people. This is key to maintain transparency so that this situation can be resolved. And at the end, something that I really want to emphasize is that every time that we do financial compliance in Europe, every time that we do these regulations of anti-money laundering laws, etc., there has to be cost-benefit analysis. Right now, there is none. All these regulations are put in place every year. New regulations to the financial system, new regulations, new compliance procedures that are subjective in nature. And the more that we do this, the more this problem will continue to increase. Because right now the way this regulation works is that everything is subjective, extremely complex, extremely difficult to implement. So this allows regulators or bad-intentioned compliance officers to debank anybody because they will always find a proper excuse to do so. We need to take away the excuses by ensuring transparency, simplicity, clarity, and there has to be due process. If somebody loses their bank account for no reason, there has to be a process in which they can appeal decisions and that they can have their bank account in Europe. Thank you very much, and I'm open to any questions.
Okay, thank you, Jorge. I think we will continue with the schedule and then have discussion afterwards. So keep your questions in mind. Elizabeth, again, thank you for coming. The floor is yours.
So first of all, thank you very much for having me here today. And as you said before, that we can maybe also start, or hopefully start, to open the doors and to pay now here more attention to this very, very important issue. So I want to repeat what happens if your bank suddenly closes your account. No salary, no bills, no credit card, no way to receive donations or pay your suppliers. You are excluded from the modern society completely. And this is what they call the debanking, or maybe they also call it de-risking. It's also a very used term. And it happens when banks close accounts or block access to your financial services. Often, as you said, without any transparent explanation, and in many cases it appears to be politically motivated. The truth is clear. So debanking is more than a technical banking decision. It can also a weapon, as you said, and especially a political weapon. And it can stop people from speaking, organizing, and also running a business. And I want to start when I first heard about what was happening in Canada. Canada in 2022, and in the last month I met also some of the organizers of the famous and peaceful truckers protest. And what happened? The government froze the bank accounts, and also of the organizers, but not only of the organizers, also of the supporters, and even those who gave a little bit of money to go on and to protest. And what happened? The families could not have their own money anymore. And that is what then I was first talking to my colleagues about. We don't have to think only about one person. We always have to think about the whole family and what is happening to them. And Canada, I guess, showed us when governments and banks work together, anyone can be cut off from a financial system. Ask yourself, would this be for you acceptable in a so-called free society? This is not a distant problem, and now I will come to my home country, Austria, and there are also cases like this, and one is also that I know very well the family, the magazine. It is called the Freilich magazine, and it's an independent media, and we always try to work together because they are those who also give us the floor. But we are maybe not those who are always welcome by the other side of the media, but they open for us the place. And not long ago, it was like in December this year, and the Steiermärkische Sparkasse, it's a bank institute in Austria, they closed the magazine's business account, and it was exactly just a week before Christmas. No explanation, no warning, right in the middle of the year end, and when you have to make a lot of payments. The consequences were serious. The team could not pay salaries, bills, or suppliers on time. Editors had to stop working on journalism and focus entirely on the crisis management, handling payments and communication and everything what means to run a business. Weeks of work were lost just because of the sudden account closure. What or why did this happen? Activists openly admitted that the goal was to make Freilich waste time finding new banking and fundraising channels. Time that should have been used for reporting and producing content. This shows clearly how debanking can be used as a tool to silence independent voices and weaken press freedom. But I guess we will hear a lot about this then also from Elsa. And despite the challenges, Freilich survived. But how did they survive? Because of the support of the readers, new subscriptions and donations. But the cost was high. Precious time, focus and resources were stolen from the journalistic work. This case is a clear warning. Debanking is not just a financial issue, it's a threat to free speech and independent media. But debanking is not just a problem far away, it happens everywhere. And the other well-known examples, we have just heard about some of them, also in Germany, also the newspaper Junge Freiheit had the same problems. Then we have also, as you said, the UK, Nigel Farage, and in the Netherlands, and also in Switzerland. And so all across the European Union, I hear also from many crypto companies that struggling to open bank accounts now at this moment because of strict anti-money laundering rules. And in the USA, yes, everything is well known, and I guess we just heard it. And so these are only just a few examples, not to run out of time, but I could go on and also easily extend this list. But it makes clear to me so that debanking is not only an economic obstacle, it's a form of modern censorship. And it's very subtle, it's extremely effective. And as someone who serves as a member of the European Parliament, I find this is deeply concerning. And we have to talk about it, and we cannot accept it anymore, and we must take action, because as you also said before, everyone should have the right to a basic bank account, regardless especially of of their political opinion. Banks must be transparent and explain why they close accounts. People and organizations need legal protection. and so that we can also challenge an unfair closure. And political views must never be used as a reason to block access to financial services. And this is a matter of fairness, freedom, and democracy. And because freedom is not only about words, it's about the ability to act, pay, and participate in society. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for that. I agree with everything you said, Elizabeth. We have a few minutes for discussion, so I'll open the floor to any questions you may have. Yes, Fernand, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen, and to all your colleagues for organizing this important event and also for the explanations you give. I have a question. We had a discussion a few years ago in Europe that everybody should have a legal right to have a bank account. I think that extends to refugees, to homeless people, and also discussions about the digital euro. Now we are discussing how to make it totally inclusive so that everybody should have a digital wallet. Now, how is this compatible? If everybody should have, even including refugees and homeless people, and access to banking services, and in the digital world the same, so how is this compatible? Is there a legal obstacle or a legal problem with this that we could refer to? Thank you very much.
Yes, there is a clear legal obstacle because exactly in Europe there is directives that everybody should have a bank account and there is this effort. But every time when you're reading the document, it says that if there are anti-money laundering concerns with a person, organization, or a company, this right to banking doesn't apply. So if a person is considered by the bank, for whatever reason, as too risky when it comes to anti-money laundering laws, then these right to banking initiatives are always override. Because the way these regulations work is that you are not innocent until proven guilty. Is the other way around. So what we need to do is to create a framework in which if you are proven by a European court that you did something wrong related to illicit finance, then that's a situation. But for everybody else, you need to be innocent until proven guilty. So that's the specific reform. Until we reform that, the problem will continue happening.
Yes, please.
First of all, thank you very much for organizing this conference, and I agree with your statements and your observations, but I have a technical question because first you said that the banking sector is over-regulated, which is, in my opinion, true. But on the other hand, you propose the solution that bank, every time that closes someone's account, should report exact reason, basis, legal basis, and so on, why the bank did it. So isn't it adding another regulations that banks have to comply? How to, let's say, balance over-regulation with this new informing, reporting duties for banks?
Thank you for your question. So right now, the way banking regulation works, and particularly financial compliance work, is that all these regulations are extremely vague, they are subjective, they are complex. So you have a system in which the people who are doing compliance are put into tremendous pressure, also to be not transparent. So right now the regulation asks banks to not disclose all this information. So from this system of extreme subjectivity, in which if a regulator wants to fine a bank, they can do from subjective reasons, we need to go into a system in which the rules are clear, simple to follow, they are objective. So, for example, if somebody commits a crime in Europe, okay, take away their bank account. But right now the way it is that the bank compliance officers, they need to navigate in a system of extreme complexity. So yes, it's a new rule, but I believe that we need to take away a lot of bad rules that are really subjective. So it's a matter of having clear rules, clear standards, and due process. So I don't see a contradiction between the two. I actually see it as a simplification of the rule.
If I could just add, so the term that the banks use to justify often what they're doing is reputational risk. Now, the question arises, of course, who defines what is a reputational risk? In the case of Nigel Farage, his party now is leading in the polls. They could take over the British government after the next elections, but several years ago he was regarded as obviously a reputational risk for all the banks. So it seems that there's too much subjective space in this decision-making by the banks, and that's what needs to be clarified. Good laws, good regulations are clearly defined, and do not use terms like reputational risk that can be easily, I would say, manipulated.